Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar from the Mammal Society, taking you on a deep dive into orca behavior and conservation. This week is National Marine Week, so please do share with us in the chat box if you are attending any other events to celebrate and raise awareness. This is the third webinar in a series of free webinars from the Mammal Society, and if you'd like to stay informed about events like these and other work of the Mammal Society, please sign up to our newsletter and follow our social media channels. I'm Ariana, the Communications Officer here at Mammal Society, and I'll be chairing this webinar today. I'm delighted to be joined by our speaker today, Lauren Eyles. Before we go over some introductions, just some general housekeeping. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to share your thoughts and reflections in the chat box. We'd love to know where you're dialing in from, and any feedback on the time and format of this webinar would be really appreciated. If you have any questions for Lauren, please post them in the Q&A chat box. We may not have the time to go through all of the questions, so please use the like feature in the Q&A chat box to vote for the questions you would really like to be answered in this session. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you prefer for your name not to be mentioned, please change your display name or state in your question that you would wish to remain anonymous. Questions will be covered at the end of the session. So for those of you who don't know us, the Mammal Society was established in 1954 and is dedicated to the monitoring, study, and conservation of mammals across the British Isles. We believe in a vision where we believe in a future in which sustainable mammal populations thrive as part of healthy and diverse ecosystems, benefiting people and nature across the British Isles. If you'd like to learn more about our work, please visit our website at mammal.org.uk. Our mission is threefold. First, we work to ensure a bright future for mammals in the British Isles by inspiring, informing, supporting, and enhancing conservation projects and policies that protect and restore native mammal populations and their habitats. We empower conservationists, students, citizen scientists, and nature champions to play a key role in mammal conservation now and in the future through providing training, resources, and survey activations. Finally, we seek to build public awareness of and support for mammal conservation through education, communication, and campaigns. Now that you know more about the Mammal Society, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, Lauren Eyles. Lauren is a marine biologist and founder of Wild Ocean Wonders, with over 15 years of experience in citizen science and communications. On top of this, she is also a PADI dive master. You may have seen Lauren on BBC's Blue Planet, as well as Spring Watch and Countryfile. Lauren is passionate about raising awareness on both what the oceans have to offer, as well as sharing the threats they face. Finally, without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Lauren to start the webinar.
Oh, thank you very much, Ariana. So we're just gonna, oh, there we go, got it all up, thank you. So afternoon, everybody. It's really fantastic to be here and to be speaking with you all today. As mentioned there, I started Wild Ocean Wonders only a few months ago, and engaging and inspiring others is really at the heart of everything that I do. I have a background in citizen science, engagement, and during that time, over 15 years, I have worked on various projects, raising awareness and collecting really vital information about cetaceans. So I used to work with lots of volunteers out on the coastline, recording whales, dolphins, and porpoises, mostly across Devon, but also across the UK as well. And that information is hugely important to understand their populations, their movements, and to obviously help protect them into the future. So I run Wild About Experience at the moment, and that includes running rock pooling events, taking people out snorkeling, because I think just so many people don't realise the amount of amazing marine wildlife that we have right here in the UK, and it's really kind of showing and introducing people to that there is so much here to see, so many cool things, and yeah, just really inspiring people of all ages of that. I also run talks and training as well. And this picture here that you can see was a very happy me, having just seen Orca in the UK and in the wild for the very first time. What a moment. And I have seen orca before, about 20 years ago now, but that was unfortunately in captivity, and it was part of a trip that, you know, I kind of had to go along to. It was part of something that was organized, and I think it's fair to say at that point in time of my life, I didn't have a true sort of understanding of the impacts of cetaceans in captivity. So obviously that was a very different experience for me. So this moment was really, really special, and one that I will never forget. And it was actually this moment during a filming project that happened finally after years of planning and being postponed over the last few years. But I'm really pleased to say that I finally got to Scotland last year, when the story finally began. Over to the next slide, please. So during this webinar, I'm going to be chatting to you about this filming project. So a little bit of behind the scenes about what we did, how Orca is part of a project called Orca Watch. So how that actually runs, what it's all about, what it means, what happens, a little bit about the conservation of orca and cetaceans, populations, and also recent behaviour, which you may have heard about in the current news. So I'd like to start by showing you a really short snippet of the film. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to watch the film that was within the invite that the Mammal Society gave and posted, but the full film can be viewed on my YouTube channel, and of course we will be able to share the link with you afterwards as well. So hopefully this won't glitch too much. If it does, we'll just stop it there, and we'll carry on with the webinar, and you can obviously catch up with the film in your own time. So let's have a little look at the film.
Scotland is a majestic country full of mountains, endless coastline, and diverse, nutrient-rich underwater landscapes. But some of this country's incredible treasures remains hidden to many and are only found by those willing to immerse themselves in the search. It's here from John O'Groats and surrounding islands Orkney and Shetland that you may get to see some amazing marine wildlife, including iconic orca. This part of Scotland, together with Orkney and Shetland, is a hotspot for seeing orca, particularly in late May and early June. Sea-Watch Foundation, who work to protect whales, dolphins and porpoises in the UK, organise Orca Watch every year. It's just one of their citizen science projects involving the public to help collect this vital information on the huge diversity of marine mammals in our UK waters, including the iconic orca from this very special place. People come from far and wide, all with the hope of seeing orca and the northern community of pods that can be found up here. There's a real buzz around finding the orca. Some people who have never seen one before, some people who have seen them many times before and come here year after year. The buzz around seeing orca is what brings people here, but whilst out on the water, there's also a really good chance of seeing other amazing marine animals like minke whale, Risso's dolphins, harbour porpoise, grey seal, and also the harbour seal, which is what the orca are here for and have been seen targeting. Cetaceans are under threat by many different things, including noise, water and plastic pollution, by being accidentally caught through bycatch, and also vessel strikes. Orca Watch started about 10 years ago in response to a development for some tidal turbines in the area, and it wasn't clear back then on how marine mammals use the area, in particular orca. So scientists wanted to understand a little bit more about their distribution, their status, how they were using the area in terms of their populations, so we could understand if the development was going to cause them any harm.
So we come from
So I am the regional coordinator for Sea-Watch Foundation, who organise this event every year. And Sea-Watch have regional coordinators all across the UK. I think there's about 20 of us, all dotted around. And what that means is that I am the point of contact in South Wales, where I live, to help people with species identification, because I think there is a lot of quite a bit of a confusion around that, where people kind of see a fin and they instantly think it's a dolphin, whereas it could be a whale species or actually a porpoise as well. I also help people with submitting data. Sea-Watch Foundation obviously have a website to do that, but they also have an app as well, which is obviously the easiest and the quickest way to get information to them, and it's helping people with that process. I also help people with training, run training events and organise events as well. And Sea-Watch Foundation actually have their big national event which starts tomorrow, called National Whale and Dolphin Watch. And a bit like Orca Watch, it's a big citizen science project which involves lots of people watching from the coast, from boats, to gather information on different whale, dolphin and porpoise species, but also species of seals, sharks, some fish as well. So it's not just restricted to cetaceans. So that's starting tomorrow, and it really gathers this amazing snapshot over this week of different species in different areas across the whole UK. And obviously that data is then used to help the conservation of these species. The idea to film Orca Watch started back in 2019, with the idea to film in 2020, and that was really to shine a light on the project, because I think so many people just don't realise that we have orca in our own waters, right here on our doorstep, which is, yeah, people are obviously quite shocked by that, but really quite excited about that prospect and seeing one. It's just something that people just don't realise. So we really wanted to shine a bit of a light on this project, and that you can see these amazing marine mammals in our own waters. But obviously, for various reasons, it didn't happen in 2020. And then from then on, different years, we just kind of kept the monitoring local. So it didn't happen. But what it did allow us the time to do was to apply for funding, because it was just me. I was just going to take myself up to Scotland and film this. I have a little bit of kind of filming and editing experience. I have my own YouTube channel with not a huge amount of videos on. It's always the time to actually put them together, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. So it was just going to be me. But it really allowed us the time to apply for funding and to get a filmmaker on board to really kind of give it that boost that it needed, and with the kind of idea that we would go up to Scotland in 2022. And we got the funding, which was amazing, really, really exciting. And we started to make plans around, what we wanted the film to look like, what we wanted to include in it, the kind of message that we wanted to get across. But then I fell pregnant, but that really wasn't going to stop me, and with a few adjustments, the whole family was going to join me up in Scotland, my 7-year-old and my 7-month-old at the time. So flights and accommodation were booked, and it was finally going to happen after all this time. Next slide, please. However, life had other plans, and we all got to the airport for the start of this amazing adventure, not realizing that adventure was going to turn into one hell of an adventure, and this was our new plane. We were all sat in departures, and all flights were cancelled within literally minutes of the departure time and our flight leaving. So our options were to either go home, and obviously I'd be letting a lot of people down, and obviously the project wouldn't actually go ahead, which would be a huge shame, or we all get in the car and we drive 700 miles to John O'Groats. So that's exactly what we did. And there is a very happy child there, also set up in the back of the car as we made the journey north overnight. Next slide, please. So the journey, as you can imagine, was very long, particularly with 2 children in tow. Not exactly what I had in mind, but I was determined to make this work as a working mum, and particularly after all the hard work that I put into the project. And boy, was it such an achievement once we made it. Of course, it's really hard as a working parent, and I'm sure there are many of you on this call who can relate to that. But equally, there's something really quite special about being able to combine the two together. And next slide, please. Once we were there, it was really all about spending as much time as we could at sea, on the land, to give us the best possible chance of seeing orca, and that meant a lot of searching. Orca Watch, as mentioned, is a citizen science project, so it is all about people watching the ocean, and this is done from both the land, from various watch points along the northern Scotland coastline, but also from the passenger ferry that makes its way to John O'Groats to Orkney twice daily. It takes about 2 hours, and it takes people who want to go for a day trip to Orkney, but it also takes orca watchers as well. And the boat is full of orca watchers, very excited people about seeing orca, but also other marine wildlife whilst you're out on the trip as well. And I think what's really special about Orca Watch is that you kind of really get that sense of community. You know, you're kind of really surrounded by lots of like-minded people who are really passionate about marine mammals, about marine wildlife in general. So it's just lovely to kind of be surrounded by people who are your kind of people, and also to make new friends, to kind of chat to people about their stories and about why they're there, and you know how many times they've been up to Orca Watch as well. And if you register as kind of an official volunteer, you get a band which basically gives you a discount on the price of the ferry trips. There are also wildlife trips that go out, so they have the 2 ferries, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, that kind of take day trippers to Orkney, but then they have a couple of wildlife trips that don't necessarily go to Orkney mainland, but they kind of go around the sites of the area, showing people all the amazing wildlife and seabirds. So there's an opportunity to get on 4 different ferries through the day. But as with any wildlife, nothing is guaranteed, and it's all about putting the hours in, unless of course the behaviour of the orca make it super easy. But unfortunately for us that year, last year they didn't. So it was really chasing them around. We're not chasing them, but trying to find where these elusive orca were. And as I said in the film, some people return to Orca Watch year after year having never seen an orca, and they've just been really, really unlucky. But for other people, it's their first time, and they might, see one for the first time, which is amazing. And there are lots of different groups once you're there, and even prior to that, lots of Facebook groups, but a specific app for Orca Watch, which keeps everybody up to date with sightings, where people are seeing orca. And that's another, it's just another really amazing thing about citizen science, because, you have lots of people looking in different places, so you can almost track different species up the coastline and kind of catch them along their route. So each day it really was a case of deciding where to kind of go based on different sightings, but also conditions as well. You might not want to hop on the ferry when the sea state is not great, so you can kind of base yourself from one of the land watches instead. So Orca Watch are amazing top predators, and They are highly intelligent and they are found in all oceans, the widest ranging cetacean out there. And they move in pods with kind of a head lady. So it's the oldest female in the group, called the matriarch, and she's the boss. Everything revolves around her. So it's quite similar to other species that you might know about that has this kind of structure, this matriarch that's kind of at the top. So for example, like elephants, lions, and also bees as well. So orca as well, they also have different types. There are different types of orca depending on their size, their appearance, what they like to eat, and their different dialects, how they communicate with each other. So there's 3 general types. So there's residents, there's transients, and there's offshore. So residents generally just kind of feed on fish species, and transients generally feast on other cetaceans and other marine mammals like seals, and offshore orca generally base themselves obviously more offshore. And up in Scotland, northern Scotland, there's several populations of orca, but most are semi-resident. It's known that there are a few pods up there that do spend their time both between Scotland and Iceland, and the main pods that you can see are what's called and referred to as the 12s, the 19s, the 27s, the 64s, and the 65s. The 27s are most frequently seen in and around Shetland. You often get reports of them up there. And of course, again, this is mostly known from citizen science and building up a picture of different numbers of these different species, but also where they're being seen, and of course with the help of photo ID. I mean, with lots of different species in the marine environment, photo ID is just an incredible resource to help identify different individuals, and then obviously with the orca, different pods, and that's how you know that that's what you're looking at. And there's something called the Scottish Killer Whale Photo ID catalogue, and that holds a record of known communities of orca with the matriarch as the top of the group. So it's the number which is what each pod is referred to. So the 27s, the 65s, and so on. And that is the number of the matriarch. And new calves are then given a number which is the next in sequence within the catalogue, if that makes sense. So this is a massive resource, and obviously something which will continue to be added to develop and evolve, and a brilliant conservation resource for sort of upcoming conservationists into the future as well. And next slide, please. So in between watching the ocean, we spent some time obviously filming some pieces to camera to obviously put the film together, because obviously a lot of it was about, you know, spending time out at sea from the land, trying to get this amazing footage of orca, for seeing them in their marine environment. But also to put the film together, we needed to obviously provide a story and capture different pieces from individuals that are part of Orca Watch and volunteers that help Sea Watch Foundation to collect this information almost on a daily basis. The lady that you can see there, and who is also in the film, is another one of the regional coordinators up in northern Scotland, and she has been involved in this work for some time, and often reports cetacean species to the app, and helps, you know, again with training and events up there. And you can see there just that this is basically, we filmed her at her house, and you can see the cove just in the back there, and she has in the past have had killer whale come into that cove just at the back of her garden. So yeah, absolutely amazing. It's an absolutely stunning bit of coastline, and if you haven't been up there, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely stunning. Yeah, and to have orca in the water in your back garden is just, yeah, just incredible. Next slide, please. So this is to show you where the different watch points are along the northern coastline there. So you'll see all the yellow stars are all of the watch points, the kind of dedicated land watch points. So quite a few there, extending, you know, sort of south along, you know, down the coastline, but also to the west. And these are the points where dedicated volunteers sit watching the ocean for signs of activity. So that could be anything from spotting a fin to sort of splashing, but also seabird activity as well, because that often indicates that there is some kind of activity underneath the water. So these are all really good signs to look out for. And these dedicated volunteers are, yeah, just amazing, because that helps with sightings and following different pods of orca up the coastline, which I've mentioned. The white line shows the ferry route, which goes from John O'Groats, right at the top tip there, and to Orkney, to Berwick. But it was actually in the channel of water that's north of that sort of small island at the south there, called Scapa Flow, which is where the individuals that we filmed as part of the film were actually seen. More on that in a minute. And the most iconic part is something called Dungodsbury Head, which is the sort of the furthest top right tip where there's a star, and that is a really iconic part of Scotland and northern Scotland. And when we were there, actually, 2 orca were seen travelling further from the south coast. So on the east coastline, they were much further south, and it was actually a couple of male orca that now are being seen more frequently spending time together, quite a young pair of orca, and they were seen further south, and then we were able, through various different kind of watch points and volunteers, to track them up the coast. And they were kind of, you know, the WhatsApp group was pinging constantly of, you know, they're up at this point now, they're moving further north, and they passed that headland, and then they actually went further up into Orkney there, and then they actually went back to where they were originally found, at a place called Fraserburgh, which is much further south actually from those starred watch points there, but seems to be a hotspot for orca more recently, and orca seem to be being spotted from a place called Fraserburgh over the last few years. So that's another really good place to see them. So that's much further south, sort of south of the Moray Firth, and then sort of east of that channel of water. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, most of the pods in northern Scotland are semi-resident, but the UK does have a resident population of orca, but it's the UK's only remaining one, and it consists of 8 individuals. So that's 4 males and 4 females. And that's called the West Coast Community, and within it, a couple of individuals, 2 males called John Coe and Aquarius. Now, you may have heard of these 2 in the media. They're celebrities in the orca world, because they're so distinctive. That picture there is of John Coe. He's got this very distinctive notch taken out of his fin there. Not obviously really well known why that is, but suggestions are that it could have been from some kind of boat strike. But unfortunately, it's just these 2 individuals that have been seen for quite some time. They're generally seen in the Hebrides most frequently, but they have been spotted in Wales and also across to Ireland too. But they do travel, and they have been seen actually earlier this year for the first time ever up in northern Scotland, and back in 2021 they travelled to Cornwall as well, causing much excitement and stir. So they do get around. However, this community unfortunately is in trouble. No calves have been born into this group for over 20 years. And these two individuals, Jonko and Aquarius, are the only two that have been seen in the pod for some time. So it's not really understood whether this pod of 8 is actually now down to 2. An autopsy of a female called Lulu, who was only 20 years of age, was found dead in 2016, who was from this group up in Scotland, with high levels of something called PCBs in her tissue, and could be a clue to why this community is now under threat of extinction, unfortunately. PCBs is a form of chemical pollution, something that was banned in the 1970s, but unfortunately is still ever present in the marine environment. PCB stands for polychlorinated biphenyls, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it just kind of really shows you the whole impact of pollution, not only litter pollution, but sort of chemical pollutions as well, which are only kind of fully being a little bit more understood now of the true impacts. And PCBs have obviously remained in the environment for all that time, since the 1970s, and unfortunately for the West Coast community, they are a community of orca that feed mostly on other cetaceans, so more of a transient population. Interestingly, they're also a lot bigger than the northern Scotland communities as well. As I said previously, all the different kind of pods of orca do vary slightly with their different diets and populations and dialects as well. So unfortunately, they do feed on other cetaceans, and so these PCBs and chemical pollution is accumulating up through the food chain and up to them. So this chemical pollution was found in the tissue of Lulu, who was found back in 2016. So yes, a real stark reminder of pollution and the awful effects that it can have. However, in contrast and more positively, there are several northern Scotland pods, and over the last couple of years have been seen with calves and are doing really well. So they include the 65s, the 64s, the 27s, and the 169s as well. So yeah, really nice to see those communities doing super well. Next slide, please. So orca have, you may have seen in the press that they've been showing some really quite interesting behaviour recently in Spain, Portugal, and also in the UK as well, up in Shetland. And exact reasons are not known for this. I mean, it's only something which is kind of a very recent behaviour, although it's something which has been really kind of highlighted in the press recently. It is a behaviour which has actually been ongoing for about 3 years now. It started back in 2020, and there have been about 500 reports of this type of behaviour since. And this behaviour is essentially an orca and other orca are sort of going up to boats and sort of bumping boats and causing a bit of a stir. And it's believed that this behaviour, an orca is responsible for that, called white Gladys. It's predominantly been happening in the Straits of Gibraltar, so that body of water in between Spain and Africa. And it's believed that white Gladys, this female matriarch, once suffered a trauma from boats and is now acting in a defensive way. And because orca are such intelligent, amazing animals, it's a behaviour that's being learned through the pod. So other orca are picking up the behaviour as well. But that's only one theory. It could also just be playful. It could be sensory as well, because the boats might display and kind of have a bit of like a sensory sort of feeling for the orca, and that's something that they're kind of enjoying. So it's something that is going to be kept an eye on, and scientists will continue to look at this behaviour and monitor kind of incidences and where they are actually occurring. The incident up in Shetland this year was an unusual one, because it hasn't ever been reported there, and there's obviously, you know, sort of speculation whether this behaviour has been learnt from the Straits of Gibraltar and transferred up to Shetland, but it can't be ruled out, but it's very, very unlikely, because the pods in Scotland and the pods in the Straits of Gibraltar, whilst orca do travel quite long distances, they don't generally mix, and it's obviously a behaviour that needs to be observed and learned. So it is unlikely that the two are connected, but again, it's something that, you know, needs to be monitored, and over time, you know, we'll sort of gather a bit more understanding of actually what's going on. So moving on to then the encounter that we did have. So we spent most of the week searching until we were absolutely starting to lose hope, and we only had a day left. We were absolutely exhausted, wobbling around all over the place, having spent lots of time on the ferry and different boats, but we gave the evening ferry that one last day, one last shot, and because of course we had to, and thank goodness that we did, because there was nothing all the way there, all the way back, and we really thought that we were going to have to make the long journey home, having not seen what we came up to northern Scotland for, until suddenly a call, literally as we were 10 minutes going back to John O'Groats, a call came in from some volunteers who were watching on Orkney that they had seen orca in Scapa Flow, in that body of water in sort of the mid of the islands up in Orkney, and hearing orca travel and bellow through the boat was just something that you'll never forget. It was very, very exciting, because of course orca hadn't seen from the ferry all that week, so it was quite a moment, and again just really shows the power of citizen science and many people watching the ocean, and it was these volunteers on Orkney that made the call to somebody, one of the volunteers on the ferry, and we were actually just communicating with the volunteers on land, with the ferry, and they actually directed us to the area where the orca were, because in that kind of amount of water it can be really, really hard to locate them. So and this was the moment that was captured by one of the land watchers when we finally caught up with the pod in the most amazing sunset. And then the next just shows the absolute joy afterwards of the whole crew of the Pentland Venture, which is that ferry that goes to Orkney, for taking us out to see these absolutely amazing marine mammals. They basically took us back out. We dropped the passenger visitors to Orkney back to John O'Groats from that ferry, that evening ferry, and whilst they should have kind of finished their shift and gone home to their families, they actually turned around and went back out with the group of people that obviously wanted to go back out to find the orca, to help us to see them. So absolutely amazing, and just an incredible moment afterwards when everyone was just so unbelievably grateful that they did that for us in their own time. We did rally round and get a bit of a collection for them for our absolute gratitude to them, and then so just a really happy family visit there. Not exactly what was planned, but we absolutely loved it, and we will definitely be planning another trip back up to Orca Watch and to northern Scotland soon. Hopefully not with the epic drive, but actually we really enjoyed the drive, and of course that is better for the environment, not to get on a plane, and we really made it into a trip, and my son was really excited for it. We got him a journal. He kind of did a few things along the way, the different species that we were seeing, for everything, for birds, anything that we saw on land, and a kind of little sketch pad. So we really made it a lovely little trip. And the best time to see orca in northern Scotland is between April and September, and there are plenty of Facebook groups to keep up to date with all the different action, not only for Orca Watch but for other times of the year as well. And if you'd like to experience Orca Watch for yourself, next year's dates haven't quite been set yet, but it's always generally around the end of May, early June, in that kind of half-term period. But they should be set towards the end of this year, so do have a look out. There is a Facebook group for Orca Watch, so I would really recommend joining that one, because that's the best to kind of keep up to date with all the developments for next year. So thank you so much for listening. Please do follow my work, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and yeah, but welcome any questions that you have right now. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for that. We'll head into questions soon. Let me just share my screen again. Yeah. So we have a few questions in the chat, in the Q&A box. First, from Sarah. She asked, well, you have a bit to add, as what do you know about the orca attacks to fishing boats near Portuguese and Spanish coast published in the media? Do you know what led to this behavior?
Sorry. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think I've I included that in the talk, but yeah, it's it's believed that it was all around this female matriarch who has suffered some kind of trauma, and that's kind of prompted the behaviour. But yeah, with any wildlife, it is really hard to kind of understand it fully, and it often needs a bit more time to kind of see what happens, to keep kind of monitoring the behaviour, and yeah, kind of research it from there.
Right. Next one is from Saskia. Saskia asks, I was wondering what your view/success on the utilization of photo identification methodologies in relation to citizen science. The public can get more involved, contribute to science, and the addition of valuable data for understanding population. Is this something commonly being implemented?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a very tried and tested method, and is hugely helpful to understand. I mean, to firstly identify different individuals, not only in cetaceans, but it's also used for many other species like seals and sharks as well, just in the marine environment. So it really helps to kind of identify different individuals, build up that kind of catalogue, I guess, of these individuals, different fins, and different patterns. And then that can obviously, you know, sort of pinpoint different communities of whatever species that you're looking at, and, you know, sort of look at different kind of conservation methods, and understand, you know, where they might be moving, and help those different species as well. So it's a brilliant method, and one that is, you know, quite widely used across marine conservation, and yeah, one that really helps with conservation of the different species as well.
Our next question is from Sue. Sue asks, why are orcas sometimes called killer whales? Where did the name killer whale come from?
Yeah, good question. I think it was many years ago when fishermen were out on the water, and I think that it was because they were preying on you know, sort of another species, and so I think that's where it started, that they were a type of, well, obviously not a whale at all, they're actually part of the dolphin species, but these orca were killing different animals, and that's kind of where it started.
I see. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, next we have a question from Serena. Serena asks, is the behavior of orcas different in sightings from land versus out at sea? How do sightings from both help conservation efforts?
So I guess yes is the answer to that question, because you have the different types of orca that I was describing. So the resident species of orca mostly feed on different fish, and most of those up in northern Scotland are these kind of resident species. You do see them really quite close to land, and there's some amazing photos of people just kind of stood on the cliffs and they're just right there. But then you also get the more offshore species of orca as well. So yes, definitely, there are the two different types. And what was the other part of the question? Something about the conservation efforts.
How do sightings from both help conservation efforts?
Yeah, so both massively help, because obviously they're in these different locations and will be displaying different types of behaviour, interacting with different prey species as well. So we can of course start to understand the impact on other species in the area, but also on sort of fishing as well, because you get obviously the offshore species of orca will be preying on different types of fish to the species of orca that are closer to land as well. So it informs the whole picture really of where these individuals are, what types of prey that they are preying on, how climate change impacts that, and then that will inform conservation within the fishing industry, and also kind of developments as well. That was the whole kind of reason behind why Orca Watch started, around sort of wanting to develop different things offshore, so that can really help with understanding where species are, which will then kind of mitigate against any developments in those areas.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Farah, who asks, what environment is best conducive to the orca and what measures can be taken to protect them?
So yeah, environment, they're in all oceans across the whole world, so they're really quite really wide ranging and can adapt to sort of warmer waters up to sort of the colder waters of the Arctic. So they're very adaptable, and yeah, one of the most wide ranging, and that is again something that we can sort of understand. I mean, orca, as mentioned in the film, have lots of different pressures, as most animals in the marine environment, so they are really quite impacted by pollution, as the presentation highlighted as well, by litter, by bycatch, so by fishing practices, and by boat strikes as well. So they are impacted by all of these threats, and so each one of those impacts has a different kind of solution and ways around it. But with any kind of impact in the marine environment, it's often a multidisciplinary problem. So there are lots of different kind of pieces to the puzzle to try and kind of help the situation. But generally speaking, engagement, inspiring others is just a really powerful tool. If people don't know about something and don't know where things can be found, can be seen, anything about them, then it's much harder to understand and to relate to. So engagement is brilliant. Campaigns obviously can help as well, but also informing and influencing policy is a big one, and lots of sort of charities do that, specific to cetaceans as well.
Definitely. We have a bit of a long one from Jasmine. Jasmine says, hi, Lauren. Is there any career advice you could give to someone wanting to work in the field of marine mammals? I collected field data on bottlenose dolphin for my zoology undergrad dissertation and now work in a GIS data role. I would love to be able to incorporate data and GIS in the future with marine mammals. Are there any suggestions you have to do this, and whether there are certain organizations or volunteer opportunities you would recommend?
Yes, I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? It's really hard. And I think what you're doing sounds amazing. That sounds like you're on really doing the right things and on the right route towards it. It's just kind of plugging away, as you say, volunteering. So there are a few charities it depends where you're based, but there are a few in the UK. So there's Sea-Watch Foundation, who are based in Newquay in Wales, and they always welcome volunteers. And it sounds like you've got some fantastic skills there to offer around GIS and the data side of things. And I think that is something that is really good for cetacean research and science. Particularly, citizen science is something which is becoming so big, involving lots of people in gathering data, but it's obviously, being able to use that data to obviously better protect the species as well. So that sounds amazing. So Sea-Watch Foundation are a great one. Whale and dolphin conservation are another good one as well. So they have a national reach and work internationally as well. So definitely reach out to them. There's the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Society group, who are based up in sort of further up into northern Scotland, and they do a lot of work with the different communities of orca up there. So definitely reach out to them as well. It really depends where you're based, but it sounds like you're doing all the right things. Just keep plugging away, I think, is the main thing as well. Don't be disheartened. It is hard to kind of break into marine conservation and any other conservation. It's really quite difficult. So just don't give up. Be determined. Absolutely reach out to these different organisations and find opportunities. And often, if you do that, opportunities will come to you.
I think we have time for one more question. I might be putting two questions into one so that we can cover it. But so we have one from an anonymous person saying, is the UK community containing John Coe and Aquarius considered functionally extinct now? And Paul, who also asked, are we seeing an increase or decline in local numbers?
So John Coe and Aquarius are considered nearing extinction. Yes, they have gone from a pod of 8 to what we think is now a pod of 2. 2 males, obviously, so there is no matriarch as part of that pod, but John Coe is kind of always referred to within that kind of really distinct pod because he is the oldest of the 2 individuals. I mean, it's still not fully known whether the rest of the pod are still out there. I think it's believed that they probably aren't. I mean, they haven't been seen since 2016, and the latest, obviously, member of the group was found, with these high levels of chemical pollution in her tissues. So yes, they are. It's likely that they are considered near extinction, but I think there is still a question around where the other pod is, those individuals, and numbers are up in northern Scotland, as I said, are really healthy. They're doing really quite well, moving between Scotland mainland up in the north and Iceland across to Shetland, and they over the last couple of years have all seen with new calves in their pods as well. So they are doing really quite well, which is lovely.
Well, we have just one more question, if this can be a bit quick, just before we wrap up, from Toby asking, is the curvature of mature males flukes due to sexual selection or another reason?
Yes, it can be. I mean, male dorsal fins are huge, so it can sometimes be the weight of that dorsal fin, but yeah, it can just be also differences between the different pods as well. So some dorsal fins will kind of have like a slight sort of curve inwards, and others will be sort of more sloping. So yeah, it can be from a variety of reasons, really, as well as the sex of the individuals too.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for today. That was very informative, and it was great hearing about orca behavior and conservation efforts. It was really good to have this webinar during National Marine Week as well, to raise awareness about just basically what the oceans just have to offer and everything.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, and absolutely, if anyone's got any other questions, my details were on the end of the presentation there, so reach out to me. If you have any further questions about careers or specifics to orca behaviour conservation and what I'm up to, then please reach out. Yeah, I'd really love to hear from you. But yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, really fab to be had for such a a wide range of you from across the world as well. Absolutely fantastic. So thank you ever so much.
If you'd like to get involved with the Mammal Society surveys, you can do this by downloading our free app, Mammal Mapper, and record any sightings of mammals, whether marine or terrestrial. Lauren, if you haven't already and you're doing another drive up all the way to Scotland, do download it, and your kids can also join in.
Brilliant.
Well, finally, any support to our work would be very appreciated. You can donate today or sign up as a member for as little as £5 a month. You'll receive a quarterly Mammal News magazine, receive discounts on our trainings and events, and also have the opportunity to steer our work. Thank you again for joining us on this lunchtime webinar. And once again, thank you so much to our guest speaker, Lauren Eyles, for joining us. Please do keep an eye out for events like this in the future, and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you again. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.